and welcome to the Uplifting Relationships Podcast. I am beyond thrilled that you are joining me today. And when I tell you, you are in for a treat, oh my gosh, you are in for an absolute treat. Today we have an amazing expert guest here to share all about her experience, and she's going to share information with us on how we can kind of really focus on uplifting our relationships, focusing primarily on marriage. And as you know, we focus on the research, the practical, and the biblical. So without any further ado, I want to welcome to the Uplifting Relationships Podcast my friend, Dr. Ashley Jackson. I feel like I should be like, having the little
You're so sweet.
fingers and like the noise, the background noise.
Oh, I'm so down for background noise.
Yes.
But yes, I'm Dr. Ashley Jackson. I went to, I got my undergraduate degree at the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga in psychology, and I met my sweet friend, Dr. Bolar, at Auburn University, where I got my master's in marriage and family therapy and a doctorate in human development and family studies. Then after that, I worked as an primarily adolescent therapist at a few different community mental health centers, and currently I am a school counselor at a middle school.
Yes. Oh, Ashley, thank you so much for sharing all of your experience. Yes, I was so blessed, to meet you in graduate school. We were both working on our degree in marriage and family
We
therapy.
were all those many moons
Oh
ago.
gosh, I don't want to give away our age and say how long it was, but it was just a very rich experience. And I loved how you just described, kind of your journey, with, working as an adolescent therapist, and now you're in the school system. And so could you just tell me why is mental health important to you, and what is your passion behind doing this work? Why is this even something that you desired to do back then and even today?
Well, this was something, I don't think it's something I chose. I think this is something that God called me to long ago. I remember being 9 or 10 years old, and when my parents would have disagreements, I can remember thinking, if they would just listen to me, I could sit down, we could work through this peacefully, amicably, without all the extra. And I never lost that feeling, that desire to do that. And just over time, it was just I love to listen to people. I feel like God's mission for me on earth is to listen and to encourage people, and I get to do that through counseling.
Yes, I love that, and I love how you feel like God was leading you to doing that at a young age. And I feel like when we're really true to what He placed within our hearts in a young age, I think that's really true. I think that's really accurate to what we are really called to do, because we don't know anything else. It's kind of like if you feel pulled to listen to people, you feel pulled to say, if they would just listen to me, at a young age, you want to be like the architect and helping their relationship. I just think that, that's just so powerful that you got that now. And I think that's one of the reasons why I wanted you to come on, especially in thinking about how that parental relationship impacts kids. You see it every day in the school system. You've seen it in therapy, as being a child therapist and an adolescent therapist, and really thinking about how that relationship and how they are faring, how that impacts kids. In research we talk about the spillover effect, and the spillover effect is nothing more, it just says that how you're functioning in your, whether it's a parenting relationship, or even you can have a spillover effect from your job, how you're functioning in that parental relationship will spill over into how you parent your child. It will spill over into that parent-child relationship. And so that's not just a theory for you, right?
It is not just a theory. because the spillover that we see at school, for example, it manifests itself in many different ways. It can positively or negatively affect a child's behavior, their emotions, and their academic performance. So just depending on what's going on at home, like the kids are, since they're not the best at verbalizing their thoughts and their feelings and their emotions and everything, it comes out in other ways. And whenever a kid is, confident, they got a little pep in their step, and they're able to focus at school versus some others may have a different experience where you can see the heaviness on them if there's a conflict at home, or if their parents have just had an argument, or just any kind of negative emotional experience at home. They carry that with them to school.
Do you think that is always tied to, like, if a child is having problems at school, whether, especially behaviorally, do you think that oftentimes that is tied to the home environment, like maybe what they're seeing, what they're experiencing? And sometimes it's not just, between a parent. Sometimes it's situational or it's environmental as well. Do you think there's always a deeper root for kiddos? Like, what's your thoughts on that?
There's always a deeper meaning. Like on the surface level, we may see children who might be acting out somehow, whether that's if there's disrespectful behaviors towards teachers or towards other students. It doesn't just happen because they were necessarily feeling bad that one day. Whenever there's a pattern of those similar kinds of behaviors, there's always something beneath the surface, and the sometimes not knowing how to act, as my mama would say, that these kids don't know how to act sometimes, is not because they're necessarily choosing to be honoring or difficult. It's just sometimes they don't know a better way to interact with the world based on lots of different things that may spill over onto their plates.
Come on now. And I think about, like, even as an adult, like sometimes if I'm having a difficult time, my coping may not look perfect, right? And I have, like, hopefully a lot more years of experience of trying to manage my emotions and have, that impulse control. But these are kids where their brains are still developing. Like the centers of their brain that control their impulses, are still developing. And if we see this in adults, where if you're going through and if you're having a hard time, you may act differently or you may have a shorter fuse. Just thinking about, like, what does that mean for children?
Well, I think there's a big difference between a child watching a parent work through having a bad day or have a bad situation, and modeling how you go through the motions, the ups and downs, and getting through to the other side of a problem. That's one thing. But if there are chronic problems that impact a child's basic needs, like their needs for safety, their need for, like, just having being emotionally safe, being physically safe in the home, or if there's a situation where a parent doesn't have the necessary support, and unfortunately, usually we see this we have more single moms than we have more single dads in the school that I work in. I think it's a general trend, but whenever people are struggling, like, individually, to try to parent one or multiple children, I think it's hard for a child to develop some of the necessary safeguards, if you will, for, like, how to be a good person.
What I was thinking about when you said that about the safety piece is, like, a lot of times, especially when we're thinking about ACEs, we think about the things that happen to kids, right? And but like, we learn through experience, like, and through our environment is teaching us something. you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, with your environment, like, teaching you something, it can teach you how to cope, or it can teach you how, not to cope as well. And I think that with everything is teaching them something that they're going to build a foundation on for later.
Well, that is 100% true. And people learn through observation and what's modeled for them, but at a more basic reptilian level, if you will, like the way our brains respond whenever our basic needs are met and we do feel safe, that we have a more typical development of the synapses and the connections in our brains, and it helps us to regulate our emotions much better than if we're in a situation where there's chaos, there's like people trying to figure out like how to meet your needs, and if we're growing up in a place where there's lack, that it has a negative influence on our brain's development.
Yeah.
And it becomes ingrained in like just in our brains long term, and it can be fixed, but I think it's those things can be really hard to overcome if you don't know how or where to start.
Yes. It's so interesting too. I don't think that we clarified what population you serve right now, which is you work with middle school.
I work with middle schoolers.
And we have any teachers working, watching the podcast, that middle school, or if you remember your own middle school experience, that's an awkward time of life. That's when you're coming into, you're going through puberty. But when we're thinking about the mental health crisis that is facing girls as well as boys, like our adolescents today, comparatively, just a few years ago, are having a lot of challenges.
Mm-hmm.
And there are so many factors that play into that. Of course, like social media is playing into that and things of that nature. But when you're thinking about like the holistic health and well-being, like mental health and well-being and how kids are faring socially, like what are some of the biggest concerns that you see for the population that you're serving at that middle school level? Like what are they really going through at this time? Maybe like the top 3 things that you think like middle schoolers are really kind of having challenges with when it comes to their well-being, whether it may be mental health, whether it may be physically, whether it may be socially. Like what are they experiencing? Because this is a really interesting time, just in general.
Yeah,
it can be an awkward time.
I would the top 2 are definitely anxiety and depression, and I hear adults whether we're talking about their parents or some teachers or just people who adults that they interact with regularly will say, "You ain't got nothing to be worried or sad about. You don't."
They minimize it.
They minimize it. What you been through. Wait till you pay a bill. Wait till you get into the real world. But this is their real world. Their day-to-day interactions with the people around them. And I'm super anti social media just because of the things that I see every day. And I think kids' access to social media has to be moderated by their parents.
Yes.
But sometimes it's easier to just hand them a phone and you go over here and sit somewhere, and then they have unfettered access to all the things that the world has to offer.
Actually, you said so much. And one thing that really stood out to me was kind of how adults dismiss and diminish the problems or the mental health concerns of youth. And just because their problems are different from adults doesn't mean that it's not valid or something that should be paid attention to. And I don't know if you know, but I also do suicide prevention at the school. I'm a QPR
Okay.
facilitator, question, persuade, respond, trying to help with suicide and things of that nature. But one of the things that we don't want to do when someone says that they are distressed, whether it's big or small, we don't want to dismiss it.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to invalidate their feelings. And I think that's so true for like parents. Like if parents can, validate their kids' feelings and validate whether it's big or small, that makes them feel seen. And so if they know that you care for whether it's big or small, when the issues get bigger, then they'll come to you, And I was thinking too, like a lot of times, sex is like such a controversial topic or things like that, or something that parents sometimes are afraid to talk about with their kids with respect to, educating them. They're getting educated about it somewhere.
They are.
And I always say, if they can trust you with telling them like what's accurate information, even if it's small, like even if it's kind of like, where do babies come from, and you're not saying it's from the stork, if at least, if it's developmentally appropriate for where they are, you're not lying to them.
Right.
When the questions get really important, they know that you're going to tell them the truth. And then you get to indoctrinate them with your values. But I just feel like when we dismiss, it's like an adult. Like, you don't want anyone to invalidate how you're feeling. Like, if you express something, whether it's big or small, you know what I'm saying?
But I also believe that sometimes when we don't know better, we don't know how to do better. And oftentimes with parents, especially within the Black community, we can, like, you push through, you look to the next thing, ignore those feelings. It doesn't matter, it'll pass anyway.
Yeah.
It's not that big of a deal. But I think if parents aren't capable or willing to sit down with their kids, or this comfortable as a parent, I know I want to fix whatever my children are going through. And sometimes it's just being willing to sit there in the discomfort with your child and just listen, knowing you might be able to fix it, but just a willingness to be there so that your child knows, I can't go, my mama, my daddy, they got me. They're always here to listen. And like you said, it starts young. So I had to, there's a John Gottman phrase called bids for attention.
Yes.
And all that means is there are certain things that people will do when they want to get your attention or hang out with you that you may not recognize as them wanting to connect. It comes off, in different ways. So like, we do it with our partners. Like a bid for attention might be, hey, will you come and watch this show with me, or go me for a walk, right? It's a time to just be there with your person. With kids, it may look like an activity. So my sweet Hannah, she loves to play games. And when she says, Mama, will you play gin rummy with me? Sometimes I don't feel like it. But I know that just that time spent with her and not turning her away is important. Just to build the foundation of we can sit, we can hang out. And then even some of the things that seem trivial, like the drama going on with these little 8 and 9-year-olds, honey. Like you wouldn't think, like, in my adult mind, I'm like, oh Lord. But for her, it's important to tell me how Blakely and Amara are warring over her friendship, and I told her, and while it may seem mundane and trivial, I think that builds the foundation for whenever things start to get more serious. In my mind, like if somebody's talking about drugs or alcohol or taking inappropriate pictures, all that, she's going to tell me about those things.
And it shows that you care, that you have interest, and that it matters to you, that she matters. Even sitting down playing those games, it means, you matter. Whatever I was doing is not compared to me spending that quality time with you. And I tell you, it is funny, like the little things that's going on in these classrooms or things like that. And it was like, I remember my Joy's teacher, it's my youngest, and Joy's only 4 years old, right? Okay. Let me tell you about the drama in their 4-year-old pre-K classroom. Apparently, the girls were fighting fighting over who was about to marry this one boy in the classroom. Really? Okay, 4 years old.
Okay.
And they're fighting over who getting married to this one little boy in the classroom. And I was like, really?
Real Housewives of Preschool.
I know. I was like, really? What did they know about this? What did they know? I was like, where did this come from? They are 4 years old. And I was like, wow. I was like, well, maybe did one of their parents just recently get married or something like that? Or I didn't know where it came from, but I just thought that was just so interesting. So, but when we showed interest in like what our kids are experiencing, I think essentially what we're saying is we're showing an interest in them.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, it kind of breaks my heart when you said that the top 2 issues that you see are mental health related, anxiety and depression. And I feel like it is growing. I think it was the Washington Post. They were doing a study. They were talking about how the mental health of girls in particular is literally plummeting.
Mm-hmm.
And not only is it plummeting, but that a lot of young girls have been kind of experienced sexual assault in a certain degree or something inappropriate. And it just, oh my gosh, it just really just broke my heart that they're dealing with these things, and that honestly adults wouldn't have the ability to wrap their minds around,
Well, I think we like to look through rose-colored glasses when it comes to like what our kids will or won't experience.
Yeah.
But we have a sexual abuse prevention program that we do every year, and like on average, 1 in 5 boys is 20%, and 1 in 4 girls, 25% of them. So if you were to line up, 10 kids. I can't do math.
Oh, don't even ask me to do math. Don't even ask me to do math. But we get what you're saying.
But 25% of boys, 25% of girls, and 20% of boys will experience some type of sexually inappropriate interaction with another person before they're 18. So sorry. We'll experience that.
Yeah. So it's you were saying kind of like, sometimes we have these rose-colored glasses on
yes.
as parents, and no, we don't want them to have certain experiences. Mm-hmm. And you're kind of stating the numbers. Mm-hmm. Like, this is what's really going on, though, despite those desires.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I mean, we can't talk about the mental health piece, especially with girls, without bringing up the social media piece. It keeps going back to that. Like, number one, and all of this stuff has been coming to the surface recently, these apps are engineered to be addictive, right?
Yes,
they have scientists who work on this to make sure that the app is going to be successful. And we use, or the most popular ones that I see that come across my office would definitely be like Instagram and Snapchat. And people spend like hours and hours. These children spend hours and hours on these sites. You scroll, keeps to scroll for hours, make a video,
and comparison.
Do these people have their perfect lives posted online? Perfect, curated, perfect lives posted online, and then it's, well, I don't measure up to this. How come my life is different? How come I don't have the pretty pictures? Why don't I have all the likes? Which likes are equated to people really caring about you nowadays.
Oh, wow.
But the interesting part is that given the amount of problems that it causes, from the anxiety and the depression to interpersonal conflict among large groups of students, a lot of times when we make parents aware of what the issues are, nothing changes. Nothing changes.
So you'll tell the parents, this is what your child is experiencing. These are the factors that are contributing to their experience.
Mm-hmm.
And you share that information with the parent or parents. but you don't see them modifying
Anything.
how, you know, like controls or modifying how. Really?
I would say 85-90% of the time, nothing changes, despite having the information.
Really? Oh, wow. And so my question is like, so I know you work as a schools counselor in the school system, but what I love about your training is that you've been trained like to look at the whole system and look at, you know, not just the individual, but the person in their context and various different relationships and how that could be impacting that individual functioning, you know. And so with that piece, you know, with parents, like as a counselor, and what you are seeing, you know, especially as a systems theorist and, you know, kind of looking at the systems, I imagine that you probably see these presenting issues a little bit differently from your colleagues who may have been trained differently.
Yes. When you mention that, it makes me think of a conversation that comes up like in every monthly leadership meeting that we have regarding closing the gap in educational performance. And that could be comparing students with disabilities to students who don't have a disability. It could be comparing just various other subgroups, like our Black students with our white students, our students who have more resources, the ones who are in poverty. Like there's gaps, educational gaps that exist. And I'm sitting here, like in my head, knocking my head against the wall with these superficial reasons or superficial ways that people think or theorize that these gaps can be closed, okay? When really at the base of it, the majority of the issues that we see or the gaps that we have oftentimes are between the haves and the have-nots, okay? And well, how do you fix that? We can throw money at it. We got this program that we could connect a kid to, that program we can connect the parent to, when at the end of the day, whenever the parental unit is not intact, that's going to lead to a parent who's raising a child, or not all the time, but it's more likely to lead to a parent raising an impoverished child or a child who's in an impoverished situation, which increases the likelihood that they will experience some type of trauma, which then influences how their brain develops and how they interact with others. It goes back to the marriage, or if you have two people in the home who are willing to model, you have the nurturing side of things with the mom, you have the structure that only a dad can provide, you have those two working together in a way that's healthy, like the kids are more than likely going to thrive.
Yes. And you know, one thing I always say about that is I think it just ties back to all situations are not always ideal where people can create that, but it's just a part of a safety design. You know, it was a safety design, like with that piece and protecting that. And I wonder, you know, with that, do you see, and there's always a caveat I always say, regardless of your marital status, I believe we all want what's best for our kids,
Absolutely.
Right? You know what I'm saying? But I wonder, like, you know, can you maybe even pick out, if you didn't know the home situation of kids, could you line up maybe 5 kids in your school system that you may know personally, and could you like create in your mind what you think their home environment is? Like,
absolutely. Like you can see a kid's confidence in how they interact with the people around them. And that confidence translates into whether they have a growth mindset or a fixed mindset. So like when they're confident and they go into school and they can, if a problem arises and they don't know how to solve for X, in math, or how to write an essay, the students who are more confident, who have a better home situation and experiences to draw from where they're like, I've overcome a problem before, and I know how to take the steps to figure this out. They continue to try. But for some of our less confident students who may not have that same skill set, whenever a problem arises, it's I quit. I quit. And if you don't have somebody at home who's encouraging you and showing you how to get past those kinds of barriers, it's hard to just manifest that within themselves. Like, I don't know.
You know what I wonder? It makes me wonder, can you tell when families are going through transition? Like such that, maybe things are stabilizing at home or things are destabilizing at home.
Mm-hmm.
Like, can you sense, have you ever had a situation, whether it was in counseling or whether it was, in the school system where there was some type of transition in the stabilization of the home and you immediately saw an impact?
Absolutely.
Literally. Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Because again, students, they're not the best at at least the ones in middle school, they're not the best at verbalizing their feelings.
Mm-hmm.
So it's protective. Like, you don't want anybody all up in your business. So most kids aren't going to come to school with, a shirt on that says, got some problems at home, ask me about them.
Right.
They're going to kind of internalize it, but you can see a change in their demeanor. Like, maybe they're not smiling as much. Maybe they are withdrawn. Some students are more likely to lash out at other people or maybe get into a fight or a verbal altercation with the teacher. Mm-hmm. Whenever there's a transition. The biggest two that cause negative emotions that I see would be whenever there's a divorce, mm-hmm. or whenever there's a death in the family. Mm-hmm. So whenever those two big things are happening, you see a decline in a student's just overall functioning.
Could you explain, what does that look like exactly? After a divorce or a death? And a divorce is a death in some cases. It is. Yeah.
It looks like I said, a student who might normally get along well with other students may start a roast battle. Like, it starts off cute, but then it gets more serious and they start saying really mean things to other people. Mm-hmm. It might be that a student who typically does really well academically, they stop doing their homework and start turning in things, or you see a sharp decline in their grades, or they just become generally quiet. And I think the reason for that is whenever we're processing something, or especially something that causes us to feel what we would consider negative emotions, anger, sadness, or fear, and all those tend to be present whenever your folks split up. Like, what happens next? Who am I going to live with?
It changes the world,
their
literally,
whole world.
Right. It changes who's going to be living with you. Mm-hmm. In some cases, it changes where you're going to live. It may change the conditions in which you're living in. Mm-hmm. It can change everything for children. And
whenever students are in a heightened emotional state like that, they can't think. They can't concentrate because it shuts down. Those strong emotions shut down, or the part of the brain that controls those strong emotions overrides the part that controls cognition and the ability to think logically and sequentially. So,
this is good. I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just say, what would be your advice? And a lot of times there's a lot of rhetoric around you shouldn't, be together for, your kids. Or,
I disagree.
I disagree too. I think that is it's like a protection for your children, right? And there's so much rhetoric about, if it doesn't serve me. And I think a lot of times people are looking at their marriage through the lens of just themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They're not necessarily looking at their marriage as being something that they have created that now has a life of its own.
Well, I think there's a difference between American marriage and the way that God wanted marriage to operate.
Oh, come on now.
Total difference.
Come on now.
Westernized marriage is about me and my happiness, and if it doesn't work, then it's on to the next one. Let's get an upgrade.
And you haven't changed, and after the honeymoon period wears off,
you're back at the same place,
or worse,
mm-hmm.
because now what people, you're dealing with an extra layer of complexity now,
mm-hmm.
right? Blending is harder. The research is very clear on that. Like, the divorce rate is higher for blended families because you're dealing with a lot more. Now, this is nothing to go against diverse family types,
mm-hmm.
like a blended versus, first time. Oh, but anyway, the thing is that, it just makes more complex, and you're trying to fulfill yourself when you haven't recognized that the marriage is bigger than you now.
Mm-hmm.
It has a life of its own now. Like, how you are doing is impacting these kids. And this is I feel like what the Lord gave me this morning. I was like, I feel like people show up for marriage like they would a job.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they show up for marriage like, I got this job, I'm excited. I'm excited about my brand new job.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so excited about this brand new job. And they go in, they're excited, but they're like, okay, what this boss gonna do for me? What's my benefits? What am I gonna get out of this situation? And then they go and they sit at their desk and they actually do not work.
Mm-hmm.
They don't do anything in their life. And then they get there and they're like, this job isn't what I thought it was going to be. But you don't recognize you came here to fulfill a role.
Well,
you came here to work.
American marriage says
right?
that the marriage is here to serve me, to make me happy.
Yeah.
And I remember, it's easy to fall into that because you see the cute little pictures online. Everybody's like perfectly, it looks like a perfect situation, and there's plenty of movies out there that influence our ideas of what it's supposed to be. But I remember before I met my husband, there was this. It's only happened a few times in my life where I know that God was giving me a message very specifically, and the message was, I'm taking you to a place where you have to completely depend on me. What in the world does that mean? It was this feeling I had for about 3 or 4 months before I met him. I still didn't get it. So I'm thinking there's about to be some type of big something. I didn't know what it was going to be. And I was thinking in a more negative, somebody's about to die. What do you mean by this?
Yeah.
And then not too long after we got married, I realized you're talking about I have to be dependent upon you for this to work.
Oh, come on now.
Because
you're the source, not me.
You are the source because I'm imperfect and he is imperfect. And even if, maybe I might not be out here smoking and drinking or watching porn or something like that, I'm still a sinner. Mm-hmm. I might be a good sinner. I might be married to a good sinner. I might be married to a bad sinner. Sometimes I'm a bad sinner. But sin is sin.
Right.
And because of that, because of this condition that we live in, sin, we need Jesus to be able to be there to help us work through and to be able to give us for us to be able to extend the grace that we don't deserve. If we're not totally dependent upon him to work through all the ups and the downs, the decisions that have to be made, and the day-to-day,
it's so important to recognize that it's not relying on myself or even my good nature, because my good nature is not good enough.
It's not good enough.
Because I'm still yet a sinner. I'm still yet not perfect. I'm still there are things that I do that I don't always please God, but guess what? He never stops and says, because you don't always please me, I'm gonna give up on you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, like you were saying, in our westernized culture, like an American marriage, it's almost like consumerism. It's like making me happy, or how does this serve me? But we don't recognize that we come to serve it. And it gains more value the more that we serve it, instead of us looking for it to serve us. And now you've created something bigger than you. And when you look at it through that lens of me, then that can create a stronghold. I was listening to Tony Evans just today and yesterday, and he was talking about how strongholds can be built up, can come into families. He said one was rebellion, another was selfishness, and I forgot the third one that he was talking about. But I think that selfishness, it creates a stronghold in a marriage, and what it really does is it takes away the exact purpose of a marriage. See, when you don't understand the purpose of something, you'll abuse it.
Mm-hmm.
When you don't understand the purpose of it, you won't see the value and you'll throw that thing away. But I think that that's the other part, is that we have to know like the purpose and know the bigger piece of it, and how not only is this marriage for me to serve it, but it's also to serve my kids as well.
And think about it. I think about this, just popped into my head, like whenever we follow this model of marriage is to make me happy, not wholly, but it's to make me happy, and I might find I need a newer model, right? So you go into a new relationship, a new marriage with a person who has no real blood tie to your kids. Like, so the like just the pull to stay when things get hard,
it's different.
It's not the same. It's easier to leave because there are a lot more complexities you have to work through.
Yeah.
But then since we have this nature where we want to be coupled up, God said it's not good for man to be alone. I don't think that goes away. We have a desire to be coupled up, so then it looks like you're bouncing from relationship to relationship. A lot of times, like this was one that broke my heart. There was a kid who had mentioned that his father was locked up, but his second daddy wasn't as good as his first daddy, but his third daddy was the best. Because recently they just moved in with his third dad. And I think whenever we have the belief that the next one's gonna be better, or I'm only gonna say this until I'm no longer happy. Like, what are the kids experiencing from these new people who are being brought into their lives? New step siblings, and I say the only reason I say step is because a lot of times nowadays people get the title of a step parent when it's just the boyfriend or girlfriend you've had for the last month.
It's premature.
It is. So like, what are the kids going through in those situations? Like a new person that may or may not be permanent, and then another new person, another new step sibling who may or may not be permanent. Like, that's a lot of transition for a kid.
And I think a lot of the language now is, I'm so, like, a lot of people are starting to say they're so proud of their kids for handling what they're kind of putting them through so well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, thank goodness for grace, and thank goodness your child is, maturing and growing up, and life happens to us all. We cannot shield, and things are not perfect.
Mm-hmm.
But I think sometimes, even as parents, it's hard to sit back and look through the experience of the family through the eyes of your child. Like, my child is having an experience of me as a parent, and some things are toxic. Like, it's like dangerous emotionally and physically to be in a certain situation. But it's like, this kid is having an experience that I'm creating, that I'm literally creating for them. Now, I can't control all of the pieces. I can't control all of the pieces, but it makes you think, right? Like, and I think that we want, sometimes, even as parents, it's kind of easy just to look at life through your own experiences, but like, no, this kid is having an experience of me and the life that I'm creating for him.
Well, I think it's kind of like a willful oblivion. Like, if I if I don't acknowledge it,
it's not
it's
there.
not there.
It's not happening.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Ashley, this is so good. And, you know, and I'm so happy that you tied it back to marriage, because it's almost like, it's like a byword a little bit. Like, it's almost kind of controversial to talk that way or talk this way, that, yeah, having a healthy marriage matters for kids, and, you know,
It does, in so many ways.
And it doesn't, I don't think we are putting down anything to lift something up either. It's kind of like, I'm not saying like, you know, it's kind of like healthy eating. You know, healthy eating is important, you know, or you know, or certain lifestyle habits are helpful and things of that nature. And life is tricky, because life gets to life, and
it gets to life and child.
And I think too, another part of it is that for some people, even when things do not work out well, like that was something that they never foresaw. They never could have foreseen some of those things happening, and some of those traumas happening, and some traumas people just literally can't deal with. And I understand that, but I think sometimes it's kind of like, it's this ain't serving me, I can be happier elsewhere, and it's not like really, it's not a legitimate biblical reason to leave. It's I think I can do better elsewhere. I remember Esther Perel, she said in one of her TED Talks, she was talking about the new shame now is not is staying when you believe you can leave for something better.
Wow.
Yeah, and she was talking about in the context of infidelity. You know, she's like an expert in like that, but she was like, the new shame is staying. And instead of leaving to get, you know, and I was like, wow, you know, sometimes that's true, even when you think about like, oh, she can do better, or he could do better, or why do they put up with this or put up with that? But the reality, I think, that you said that I think was so powerful is that the fact that we're imperfect, we live in a fallen world, and we're human beings. The reality is that we're going to have to deal with a part of that fallen part of that person, regardless of who they are, regardless of how nice they may seem, or how it may not seem like, you know, what I do and my mistakes ain't on Front Street. Like, you know, it may seem like that, but in the eyesight of God, like me being, you know, potentially if it's me being controlling, or if it's me not talking to my husband the right way, you know, in his sight, like that's all, it's sin is sin. You know what I'm saying? And we're gonna have to deal with the imperfections of someone.
Well, and I think since, you know, like we all believe that like youthful exuberance will get you messed up. Like this belief, or like the myth that we have that we're different. I remember when we first got married, I was, and people would tell you, you know, marriage is hard and you have to work at it. And I can remember thinking, it's real cute, but we're more in love than y'all ever were. So
that's for you, and
that's for you and yours. This
ain't your mama. This ain't your mama's marriage. This is our marriage over here.
This is always gonna be like, we're always gonna be this way. But it's easy to say that when you're not doing the day to day. You don't get to see the good. You get to see the good. You don't get to see the bad and the ugly when you're first starting out.
You're not, because the representative self shows up, and that's just human nature. And
you're giddy, and your brain chemicals are different during that phase to get it
still infatuated, right? You know, you had to smell them, but then you smell.
Or morning breath.
Morning breath.
Like you don't get that, and
but you know, God loves all sides of us, and it's just like, I think you need that understanding of how God loves you and your imperfections to be able to love someone else and theirs. And when you start to walk in that grace, I think the walk gets smoother.
It does.
It's not as such a hard climb. It's not such a, I'm not looking to you to complete me. I'm not looking to you as my spouse to make my life all right, and now I'm valid as a person. No, my validation, my worth, and my value are already determined at the cross.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not looking to you. I love you, but I love you as an outpouring of the feeling that I get in my source relationship, the source of everything for me. you know. And I think too, that's when people, when the purpose is misaligned, and we're looking for marriage to bring identity.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking to marriage to bring purpose, significance, you know, beyond, like, in what ways God should be doing.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's when we start to get into some troubled waters.
And the theme, or it's the pattern, if you will, in times where I am like in prayer and I'm reading my Bible, and if something comes up, there's an issue between TJ and I. If something comes up and I pray about it, and I'm like, you know what, Lord, this is you're gonna lead me, you're gonna fix it, you're gonna show me what to do, and you're gonna order my steps in this. The outcome then compared to when I'm gonna tell him exactly what I think, and he's gonna tell me exactly what he thinks, and there's a big difference in the peace that we experience and the harmony that we have or don't have, depending on how we approach things. If we approach it like as God is a part of our marriage and we're gonna seek Him, as opposed to I'm just gonna do it the way I feel right now, there's a big difference. And our kids pick up on that.
Oh, yes.
They pick up on it. We don't have to say a word. Like the air is different whenever we're on the same page versus whenever there's tension. They know.
The atmosphere is different. They're so smart, man. Like, even as infants, they pick up on emotions. At 4 months, they can tell, like, you know, some of those primary emotions, like, you know. And so, can you just imagine if they're 10 years old, like, what they can feel in the room? And I'm so happy that you made the distinction between, like, when you take it to God versus when you're trying to handle it yourself, and the difference in the outcome. And I used to just make a beeline to, okay, well, we need to talk about this, so I need to talk about it. And I didn't invite him in. I didn't invite God in as like a not just, you know, like as a willing leader to show me the way, you know. And now when I do that and I really give it to him first, and sometimes I may not even say anything. Sometimes I might just leave it in prayer. And I may be specific about that prayer. And then when I see God deliver on that thing, it actually builds my trust in God. It does something between me and God too at the same time, like, which is really powerful.
There have been so many times I can't even count them where there's been something TJ and I may have never even spoken about it, and I will pray about it, and then he'll bring it up in the exact same way that I was talking. Like, okay,
it's God.
It is.
So beautiful.
And I think it's so funny you said. Sometimes I'll go straight to, we need to talk about this, because we know that communication is key and you gotta be clear. But sometimes I have had the experience where I can see where the amount of knowledge that I've gained through, you know, great education can puff me up to where I think I know how to approach things with him with my husband, where it doesn't. That approach doesn't always work.
It's so funny that you say that, because it's so funny that you say that, because one thing that I've noticed is, you know, with that approach of, you know, the difference between, you know, making that beeline and my education and all of that, sometimes my education has got me like a terrible outcome. And I'm like, and one day I feel like the Lord spoke to my heart. He was like, Cassandra, this, like, you need a heavenly strategy for an institution that I created. And even though, like, his strategy is above my education, his strategy is above my training, because sometimes his strategy may not even, it may look peculiar. It may look like, no, that wouldn't work, but God knows what works, because he knows my heart. He knows the heart of the situation. He knows my husband's heart. And I recognize that I can't even rely on my education and my training. I have to really rely on the ultimate teacher, the one who is really invested and really vested in this thing working for his glory, because it's a part of his bigger picture and his bigger agenda. So, oh my gosh, you're just so amazing. And
oh, this is fun.
Yes. And I love the insight that you provide, because you're on the ground, your boots are on the ground, and you're working directly with these kids, but your perspective is so different because you've been trained as a marriage and family therapist. So you said, no, it's always a root. There's always something that's driving how these kids are doing. And a lot of times it's that home environment. And I think that you gave so much encouragement too for couples, and regardless if you're a couple or not, but just for us all as parents to be conscientious of, how we're relating in front of our kids is impacting how they are experiencing us, and it's impacting their well-being.
It does.
And you broke that thing down for us today. The mental health, with the depression, with the anxiety, with everything that you're seeing with girls, and even how when you're trying to do interventions, sometimes there aren't changes, but you keep on sharing with parents. Your work is so important. And I'm just so honored that you just joined us, and I know that it's gonna resonate with so many people, that our marriages, they matter for our kiddos.
They do in so many ways.
They matter. So the work that we do, it can make a difference, not just for us, but it's bigger than us. It's so much bigger than us. So we will, in there, usually what we do is we have a question from from the audience. And I have a little Facebook group, and I ask them, and people can just email us. You can email us at info@upliftingrelationships.com. But this is the part of our show. Thank you. This is the part of our show. Oh, I can't look. Where it's kind of like anything. I don't know if it's
we'll see.
Let's see what it's. It could be girl. It could be totally not even related to what we were talking about today. Let's see. Dun, dun, dun. Great. It's probably perfect. It's like I probably could have picked a better question. How do you move forward with childhood trauma?
How do you move forward with childhood trauma? First, you have to recognize that childhood trauma is there, and it is still in operation in various ways. The way trauma works, of course, it influences the way that our brain, the different parts of our brain, interact with each other. How do you resolve it? Again, first you have to recognize that it's there and it's something that you need to work through. Second of all, there has to be a willingness to talk about it. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go back to the person who caused the trauma. If it was something going on with a parent, I need to tell you all the things that you did that harmed me, and this is the only way. That's not what I'm saying. But a willingness to talk about it in a safe space with somebody who's trained to help you work through those traumas and the different ways that it could influence your emotions right then in the moment, and the way that you think about things moving forward. Like somebody who's trained in working with trauma responses, things that cause the trauma, and how to just work through those in a safe way, I think is very, very important. I think it's important to know that if one chooses to do this work, it is work, and it is not like you might cry, and there might be times where you feel like there's a flood of emotions. I'm never going to stop crying. That's not true. You will. But the retelling of the story and the retelling of the stories or the experiences that you've had that have caused those traumas will lead to more memories that need to be processed, and that's okay. But eventually, once the retelling of the stories and the discussions about it become lesser of a threat and just a part of an experience that's ingrained in you, that's influenced you, as opposed to something that we look at as something that's to be avoided or that just completely messed me up. Like, I think working through it helps you to grow from it.
I know. You said so many nuggets. And I liked how you started off with, you have to first recognize that it's there. And you said that it takes work, that work doesn't always feel good. You may cry,
Mm-mm.
but it's not always going to be that way, even though it may feel like it's that way.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, the thing about trauma is that it can shift you, it can change you in certain ways, but it doesn't have to define you.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It doesn't have to
It
control
doesn't have to control you or the future narrative that you have of yourself either. You know,
Mm-hmm.
just so happy that you shared all of that, and I think we can end it off right there. It was just such a great ending point, and
Thank you
I
for
can't
having
thank
me.
you enough. This was just so wonderful, just a beautiful conversation that hopefully will encourage parents or people who are in couple relationships. And until we see you next time, thank you so much for joining us for today's podcast, and love you, and I mean it, and see you next week.